again, like the base elements, you have heat management, you have aromatherapy, and you have air circulation. And the towel is very functional. The towel is used to circulate the oils, circulate the hot air, and to deliver hot air to the guests.
Hoitzala, and welcome to Badii Talk. I'm Sarah Spoto, your host and the founder of the Swiss-inspired wellness brand Badii. At Badii Talk, we bring you spa and sauna recommendations so you can plan your next bathing adventure or get inspired to give sauna or bathing a try. We also feature interviews with experts and professionals in the bathing world and deep dive into your questions about bathing rituals and cultural experiences. Our name, Badii, that's Badii, is inspired by the Swiss-German word for bathing culture. We're American, but Badii Talk was born from a love of Switzerland. Let's go. Today I'm joined by Aufgussmaster Alonzo Solórzano. I'm so pleased to have Alonzo on the podcast today, demystifying Aufguss. I learned a lot talking to Alonzo, and I think you all will really enjoy our conversation. Alonzo has a wealth of knowledge, so I've split his conversation into two parts. Stay tuned for part 2. Practicing since 2022, Alonzo is a sauna master based in New York City and a pioneer of American Aufguss. He is the head Aufgussmaster at Bathhouse, practicing modern classic and his self-described atmospheric style Aufguss. Alonzo entered the practice with a background in dance and philosophy, curating a unique experience for both new and seasoned sauna goers alike. He is excited to share his thoughts as he prepares for his first publications on Aufguss. You can find him on Instagram at Aufgussmaster Alonzo, that's AUFGUSSMASTER ALONZO, and Substack at Aufgussmaster Alonzo. Thank you, Alonzo, for being here.
Absolutely.
And we're really excited to have you on Badii Talk.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Should we jump straight in?
Yes.
Let's do it. So we probably have quite a few listeners today who might not have even heard of Aufguss. So can you, describe in your own words what Aufguss is?
Yeah. So Aufguss is a sauna ceremony, a tradition of German origin. Aufguss is the German word for infusion. And really, the core of what Aufguss is all about is providing a positive heat experience. You gather people in the sauna, and your elements that the sauna master is managing is heat management, so building the heat through the application of loyalty and increasing the humidity, through aromatherapy. We apply essential oils onto snowballs. The snowballs are placed on the heaters where they evaporate and the oils, are dispersed and enter the cabin. And then the final element of air circulation through functional towel waving, or other tools are available as well. But the oils and the heat are circulated through the cabin, and then the guests are fanned with hot air using the towel. And so it's this beautiful harmony of, all these different elements and senses. And because it's set in a sauna, the sauna is heatless. It provides a comprehensive, isolated cardiovascular workout, and it's a very unique kind of workout. Most ways you're going to be working your heart will be through working your muscles, and so to be able to sit there, sit in the heat, sit in the oils, if there's music, sit in the music, just sit in the vibe. And
That's such a great way to describe it.
sit in the vibe.
Yes.
And yeah, it sort of had a shared experience, not just with the sauna master, but with everybody else in the cabin.
Yeah.
And so it's 15 minutes in duration. It can be very intense. It can be not too intense. There are longer formats. Sometimes it's shorter. It has many different styles and modalities, and they do competitions around it. It's really dynamic, Um, and, there's a lot of uncharted territory with it, but at the core, Aufguss is, again, a aromatherapy sauna ceremony. I would say a meditative aromatherapy sauna ceremony. And, yeah, it's one of the best things in the world. There's really nothing like it. And once you try it, once you get a good experience and understand it, it will demand a lot of your time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Understand that. It certainly is for you. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
If this is my first time doing an Aufguss and I was walking into the sauna, what would be kind of the step by step of the experience?
Yeah, so stepping into the sauna, so the first thing, which a lot of people don't know, is that you're supposed to air out the sauna before an Aufguss.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So what's important is we're building humidity over the course of the experience. And so what helps, you dehumidify the sauna one and then just release some of the hot air so that you start nice, slow, and comfortable. Walking to a sauna, you'll find your seat on one of the benches and the ceremony will start usually with a formal introduction. The sauna master will introduce themselves. They'll, detail the essential oils that'll be used for the ceremony, make sure there are no allergies, and we'll give, a brief introduction describing, like, if you feel like you need to step out, if you feel too hot, you're welcome to do so. This is how long we're going to go. Might describe the mood of the Aufguss.
Oh, can you give an example of what a mood might be?
Well, there's a couple functions behind the oils. So you could just have simple ones like a relaxing, sort of a meditative, purifying.
Okay.
Um, in my opinion, a lot of it depends on the music. So you could have some really upbeat, entertaining ones. There are fun ones. They're like really flat, tranquil Aufgusses.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, it's just, the sauna master will choose which set they're walking in with. So just prepare the audience for it.
And that's something the Aufgussmaster chooses, right? Because you're building
Yes.
sort of the music, the choreography, the sense, all of that together as an Aufgussmaster, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, walking in, I have some people who get some of my really intense Aufgusses for their first time. And like,
Yeah.
they have no idea what they're walking into. And like, my favorite way to introduce those Aufgusses are not with a lot of, details provided. I think it's more fun to jump into the experience. But,
Yeah. I
because,
get that.
yeah, because there's so much personality communicated through the Aufguss, it really
Mhm.
depends on, what the sauna masters bring in. But traditionally, you have a nice formal intro. Aufguss will start. You're usually doing about 3 rounds. It's going to be about like 12 minutes on music. So you're in the sauna for around a full 15 minutes.
Okay.
And then you step out. Traditionally, you might have, like a cold plunge or like maybe a natural source of water. You might just be cooling off in the air outside.
If it's cold out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that Aufguss is necessarily hot to cold in origin.
Okay.
Um, it could be. I just don't know if I'd make that strong claim, but the session itself within the sauna is, really where the juice happens.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, I can totally picture it now. Thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely.
So one important aspect and I know there's many, of course, when you're building the choreography in this experience, but the towel waving. I think for like a lot of folks that have never seen Aufguss, that's the thing that sticks out, right?
Yeah.
And it's quite intense when
Yes.
you get that towel waving over you. So
The burst of air.
yeah, what's the deal with that? And like, there's magic behind it, I know. So yeah, can you dive into that a little bit?
Yeah. So the towel waving is the craft of the Aufguss.
Okay.
It's really, best way and most important thing to understand about it. And it's very attention grabbing. Like, I think oftentimes people will jump to describing the Aufguss as some sort of dance with a towel
Yeah.
in the sauna,
Sometimes
which,
that's how I describe it.
yeah, which it's not wrong, but I actually find it's a rather confusing place to start.
Yeah.
And so when you understand that the towel waving is the craft, what's really happening in the Aufguss, again, like the base elements, you have heat management, you have aromatherapy, and you have air circulation. And the towel is very functional. Um, the towel is used to circulate the oils, circulate the hot air, and to deliver hot air to the guests.
Okay.
And so the core of it is really that, heat experience in the delivery of hot air. And then as, the craft has been developed and explored and, pushed further and further to its limits, it's become this very it's become a very well developed craft.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I really look at it is, as a sauna master, what you're doing in the Aufguss is you're using movement for the sake of towel movement for the sake of air movement.
Okay.
And so you have three layers that you're conscious of and managing. And, people will compare towel waving to, any number of centripetal crafts. So you have like poi, you have, fire dancing, you have the little like star spinners that you'll see at raves. Um, Even pizza doughs, of course, is the classic.
Okay. That's great.
Yeah. If you ever watch,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's some guy on TikTok who will like, zip the pizza dough around his body and the movements are the same.
Okay.
Um, Anything where you're doing centripetal motion, it's a lot of joints from the wrist to elbow to shoulders.
Okay.
But really what makes Aufguss different is that instead of just being limited to body and, tool movement,
Mm-hmm.
there's a third layer of air movement from that. So really what makes the towel waving special is that extra layer. And once you develop the craft, then, advanced waving is comprised of aesthetic towel waving,
Yeah.
stitched with functional towel waving. And, the degree to which you're doing one or the other kind of depends on the style that you're doing or the mood of the Aufguss that you're doing. But yeah, it's really, I place a great emphasis on crafts.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're, very, very important component of, what people refer to as art. Um, and so towel waving for me is, really full craft. And if you dive into it, people do crazy stuff.
Yeah. Well, thanks for describing it that way because, yeah, when I'm telling other folks like what Aufguss is, I do tend to say, oh, it's kind of like a dance with a towel, right? But like that is reductive because, and I think the way that you described it as like the ultimate purpose is that airflow
Mhm.
and the experience that people are getting because of that airflow in the sauna. And that's the true purpose of the towel waving. And so the choreography is born out of a actual like functional and experiential purpose.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's not
It's
just fun aesthetic movements for the sake of it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's really, like when Aufguss first started,
Mm.
like they were just whapping the towel.
Okay.
It wasn't like it's grown into something very graceful
Yeah.
as the craft has developed, but the core of it was, just people kind of smacking air at everyone, which really is all you need. It's again why it's one of sort of the base elements. But the way I usually describe it, at Bathhouse we have so many first timers, not just for off use but for sauna,
Yeah.
as it goes in much of the US. And my base description is it's a aromatherapy sauna experience or sauna ceremony. And if I
Yes.
really want to get spicy, it's a meditative aromatherapy
Yeah.
sauna
Yeah.
ceremony. And really, I think experientially, that's what characterizes it.
Mhm.
Where yeah, like the towel waving or like, people talk about my Speedo, like it's very much like what you remember going through it, but in terms of understanding what the experience is like, the meditative aspect, I think, grants people a bit more. So that's usually where I start.
Yeah, okay, I think that is a good way to think about that as well, because it is I mean, it is so deeply experiential, and it's not just like aromatherapy in the sauna, right? Because you
Yeah.
you can do that yourself by putting oil in your own bucket and pouring that on the stones, but
Yeah.
that's just one piece of the
Yeah.
full Aufguss,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think as well, like, it's I came into Aufguss without really, I have a dance background. Like
Okay.
I said, philosophy background is what got me into it, but there's multiple elements of it that are very new. Like sauna itself was new to me.
Okay.
Yeah. But aromatherapy, especially, like I had no. no reference point for any of that. And so I think what's cool is that I think aromatherapy as a therapeutic method seems a bit difficult to place. It was for me, and I think
Mhm.
for a lot of people I've spoken to, it's like you don't really know many like places where it's practiced or where you'd really experience it, where it would make sense. Like the most tangible thing is like smell-o-vision
Okay. Yeah.
movies, which like nobody's ever really done. You just kind of like have an idea of it.
Yeah.
And so what I appreciate as well about the Aufguss is that, you know, the the element of like, heat building and having this intense heat experience and the element of having this aromatherapy applied in the sauna um, make it much more tangible. Like you actually understand and can appreciate its function. Whereas anytime I've been exposed to, like aromatherapy, the closest might be like candles,
Yeah, I see what
which,
you mean.
yeah, which like you don't really engage with that in the same way. It's so much more
Mhm.
passive. So
Mm.
it's cool because it does introduce and really brings together these very powerful elements, but in a place where you can actually um, not just fully appreciate them, but fully explore them.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And that happens so much in the sauna on other aspects because it is an intense place. And so I think you do even like without Aufguss, right? You're in there experiencing things that the intensity of that kind of like heightens that and then
Mhm.
you're kind of like present in your body and like listening to the sound of the water on the stones or, the other people around you. So yeah, I think that's a great way to describe the aromatherapy is that active kind of engagement with the sense versus more passive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and like it's been cool learning how to apply the oils from that because like we learned the basics of aromatherapy when we were trained, and once we got trained, we were kind of left on our own. Uh, so
Okay.
a lot of it was, you have the fundamentals covered, and then just playing around and trying out different stuff and seeing what works and what didn't, and figuring out why it worked. And so, yeah, it's a really you know colorful practice. Not something I ever thought I'd get into
Yeah.
beforehand, but
Well, let's talk about that because I think a lot of our listeners are going to be like, "Well, how did Alonzo get into
yeah.
Outgoos?" And
How do you get into aerobic exercise in a sauna and this
yeah, and we were
times a
we,
week?
we were just talking before this interview about how much you do Outgoos. You're like you're pretty much, I mean, master is no joke, right? So, how did you get into it? And you said you were new to sauna. So, what was your path to Outgoos into sauna?
Yeah, so I grew up in Boston, in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I was dancing since 2012, and when the pandemic hit, I saw an opportunity to move to New York. Did so. My first job was like, oh, terrible. It was just so bad. But it was like move, figure it out. And
Yeah.
after a few months, I randomly applied to Bathhouse at like 2 a.m.
Wow.
Page
Okay.
6 of Indeed. Yeah, like, I almost didn't apply because I was like, I was like, "Oh,"
Yeah.
but I went back and I was like, "Well, I'm a dancer. I'm sure it'd be good
Mhm.
for my body, and, like, what's the harm in sending a resume?"
Yeah.
And luckily, they reached out, so, I went over, but at Bathhouse was my first time ever being in a sauna.
Wow.
Sauna and a cold plunge. Like, I think I did 1 massage ever in my life,
Mhm.
um, and that was the closest I'd gotten to that world.
Yeah.
So, I got to Bathhouse, and my first, almost year, my first like 9 months or so, I was just a regular employee. I was using the facility. I mean, like I was like I set the employee cold plunge record while I was there.
Oh, wow,
Like
okay. So
before
you were just
I
really leaning in.
I was very
Okay,
determined.
yeah.
But sauna was like I even now like I'm definitely better, but like I was never a great sauna sitter.
Mm,
Because
mhm.
I wasn't doing sauna a lot back then. I
Yeah.
do it occasionally, and, like, I couldn't really sit in there for terribly long because the normal feeling of, like, your body starts freaking out, and you get in your head, and you're just kinda, like, watching the clock, and, you no real sense of what's the limit, what's comfortable, and,
Mhm.
just run out of there pretty quick, so
And because there's no guidance, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like I was just there with, like, other coworkers
Mhm.
and, even when you have someone sitting in a sauna with you, it can be difficult to muster the strength to really sit, and there are techniques for it too.
Yeah.
And so, I had friends who tried to show me, but it was never a strong suit of mine. What really changed was, um, they introduced the Aufguss. It was December of 2021.
Okay.
I was at the company for, like, maybe 9-ish months at this point,
Mm.
and they just, like, posted a Slack message, and they're like, "Hey, we're doing this thing. It's called Aufguss. It's a sauna thing. Here's a video. Here's a short description. Make some extra money, and sign up if you're interested." Um, and like I said, I have a dance and philosophy background, so I was dancing since 2012. And when I moved to New York, the pandemic really threw off a lot of, everything.
Yeah.
And I moved to train in the studio. The studio closed shortly after I moved, and I was so busy that I just kind of never got into it. And then when I started working at Bathhouse really became my social life. And so dancing really took a backseat. And I kind of had this absence in my life because I've been doing movement and, had this craft that I was studying. Um, and then complementing that, I I started getting into philosophy originally of dance and philosophy of art in 2017.
Okay.
So product of my dance career, kind of was a huge pivot that I made. And really just started thinking about like what I thought dancing was, what I thought art was, and what people are describing when they use the term. I got into romantic philosophy in 2020. What happened was I got into philosophy of the spirit in November of 21.
Okay.
Just kind of, again, organic growth, product of the art and romance. And when they introduced Aufguss, I was like, this seems like a really great opportunity to explore that in, an applied practical manner. So I signed up instantly. I was just like, yeah, like this is cool. This is kind of, interesting. Dance philosophy, I'm happy. What was funny is there's a video
Okay.
that they linked. I didn't watch the video.
Okay,
I didn't
good.
I didn't need to. I was like a rip it.
Okay, you're just going.
I just vibes, pure vibes.
Got it.
All my coworkers watched the video and
Okay.
like the video's on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of naked old people in a sauna, and it's two dudes just, like, whapping.
That's it.
Yeah,
That's it. Yeah.
and so all my coworkers watched it, and they're like, "This is weird, though. This is really weird, like, we're not gonna do this." And I remember, like, the first day, like, after, and I was walking around and room, like, "Did you see that?" I was like, "Yeah, I signed up." And they're like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "But it looks," I was like, "I didn't watch the video, like, we're gonna rip it."
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's so accurate to Aufguss, and
Yeah,
if it like is weird,
yeah, yeah, I mean,
like
it's
wonderful but weird.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like sauna culture is so
Mm.
new to the US. So,
Yeah.
even just having naked people together, never mind you throwing the
Yeah.
towel wapping. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's
So,
funny. Wow, you're
so
gung ho. You're like, you know what? The vibes are good. Let's go.
I know my gut,
Yeah.
So I signed up and our training, we had someone fly out from Belgium. His name is Martin. I haven't heard his last name pronounced in so long, so I'm gonna butcher it. But he's one of the founders of Loyalty Masters and Airman, which is
Mm.
Loyalty Masters does training and certification for sauna masters. And Airman is an essential oil company, and they produce
Oh,
sauna quality essential oils, like
mm.
for sauna use.
Cool.
So, and he's been in Aufguss for a very long time. You can find videos of him like the early 2010s doing Aufguss. Um, so he flew out. He was our first introduction. It was like 12 of us, bunch of employees.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was an attendant. We had a restaurant. We had massage therapists. We had front desk.
Wow.
And, I remember
Whoever wanted to experience.
whoever wanted to. Yeah, it was like a little class of 12. And I remember he had this big puffy red robe, and he's like walking around and, like everyone, you get in the sauna for the first time and he's just like doing this insane towel stuff and he's like the oils. And I remember he was like narrating it, like gentle narration. Where he was like, yeah, we're like in a lavender field of lavender and
Yes,
had a
that's
lavender
lovely.
essential oil. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was super cool. And so we had a little intensive. It was, I think, like 3 days of training. Um, and I have video of me like first waving the towel. It's so funny. My hair was way shorter. But yeah, so we just a couple days of training, oil basics, like our aromatherapy basics, sauna basics,
Mm.
towel basics, like safety, a little bit of culture. Um, we in small groups did like a snowball, one round each of about 4 minutes.
Okay,
It was
but
at the time it was
practical, like hands-on.
yeah, at the time it was very demanding.
Yeah.
And then he left, and then we were just left to our own devices,
Wow.
and it was so new, like nobody, like we didn't know what it was, none of the clients knew what it was, like we loosely knew what we were doing.
Mm.
But I was, you know, I had some objectives in it and I was looking to explore some stuff and I was really, intrigued by it. So I pretty quickly started doing like multiple over, usually people would do like one or two a week. I started doing like a couple over a weekend, like about 5 a weekend. Um, and yeah, that's really what got the ball rolling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And why do you think you were drawn to do, those extra sessions, right? So maybe your expectation was to do a couple, but you did more.
Yeah.
What drew you to that?
Well, I mean, first things first, we got paid per Aufguss.
There you go.
It's a nice bonus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. That's great.
But I'm just a very intense person, and it was a mix of wanting to pursue it and a mix of just you know like I used to work doubles on Saturdays, and we had 3 Aufguss slots at like 12, 3, and like 6, and I would do all three while I was working.
Oh man,
Yeah,
that's
and
a lot.
it's just because that's how I am, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I got like super super just intrigued and wanted to get the reps in. Um,
You were hooked.
yeah, that was it.
So, because you've experienced, I'm sure now that you've been exposed to sauna pretty deeply at this point, some other types of rituals or experiences. Yes. And I've noticed, like, and I also got confused early on in my sauna experience, and some of the folks I've talked to as well. It's like, oh, there's this Russian one with like the oak leaves. There's that. There's also Finnish, pouring the water just on the stones and kind of
Mhm.
that being part the experience. Um, but Aufguss is distinct from those, right? And
Yes.
so I don't know if there's anything you wanted to speak to that makes it more distinct besides what you've described already. And also, you have some thinking about describing Aufguss as a ritual versus a ceremony. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, yeah, there's a good progression there. So I think a good place to start is understanding, um, I would honestly say like practices of the sauna. I wouldn't even go so far as to say, I mean, it might be appropriate to say rituals, but
Practices is a good way to describe
I
it.
think practice.
Yeah.
So you have like loily, which is Finnish, which is the application of water onto the rocks to produce steam and increase the humidity in the sauna. You have similar things like in Russian banyas where, you'll chuck water into the oven and build the steam as well.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if there's a specific term for that. There probably is, but I don't know it off the top of my head. Then you have like Venik, which is, the use of the like whisks um, in the sauna. And even that, like, you know, I I don't know if I've experienced Venik per se, but I have done a Platza, and Platza is
Yeah.
a specific service using Venik
Yeah.
in the banya. So I had my first Platza at Mermaid Spa. The guy who built our banya at Bathhouse, invited me, and I went. And that's like a proper service. It's like they bring you in, and they do the whisks across the body. You're lying down in your face and you turn over on your side and you get very hot. They increase the humidity and they're really like smacking you with it.
And that's a private that was a private experience, right? So it's just you in the room or was
No, no, no. You have everyone else is in the banya and you just like
Okay.
they have a couple spots where they'll like put down a towel and just lie down. Yeah. So
Wow.
um but yeah, so like I've done platza, which I don't know if that means I have or haven't done Venic. And with Aufguss, like Aufguss uses Loyally. That's why Loyally Masters is,
Mhm.
the company issuing certifications. But Loyally is a component of the Aufguss. And so I think that, you know, there's other sauna traditions as well. I got to experience Pirts, which is
Okay.
Latvian. And so what's fun is, you have the sauna, uh,
Yes.
Finnish.
Oh, yeah, and thanks for addressing that pronunciation as
Yeah,
well. I always I have and I've talked about this on the podcast before.
yeah.
I use the American English pronunciation of sauna, but sauna is the Finnish way of pronouncing it.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I'm the same way, but
Yeah,
you have
yeah.
sauna, you have banya, and banya is just really the Russian word for sauna.
Mhm.
And same thing for Pirt. Pirt is the Latvian term for
Okay.
say, but they have their own practices within that. So Pirts is, a similar sauna ceremony. It's using whisks. It's similar to the Aufguss in that you're building and sort of cooling it, although it's over a longer period of time.
Mhm.
There's it's the experience I had was I would say more I don't know how I would describe the music. Very like grounded and, sort of instrumental with like a little bit of chanting kind of music.
Okay.
And because it's using the whisk, there's a fragrant element from the whisks themselves, and they have like a series of whisks that they use. You like do the hot, and you go in the cold, and you come back in the hot, and
Okay.
so it's a full like 90-minute experience. It's beautiful. I got to try it in a large group setting. Traditionally, it's done one on one or like
Mhm.
one on two or maybe small groups, but um, really what unites all of the different practices is there is this very real spiritual concept and element to different saunas. So
Mhm.
Pirt says the Pirt spirit, Finnish sauna will have, I haven't done a whole lot of research on this, but they have like a concept of like spirits specific to the sauna, and they'll have like little stone idols that
That's
represent it.
the sauna elf.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So, you know, uh, you have this, existing culture with these existing practices and these existing ceremonies. I recently learned there's a Celtic. I don't know if it's sauna specific, but heat ceremony that goes back like 750 years that a handful of people are still practicing. So you have these old traditions, whereas Aufguss is like quite young, honestly. Aufguss is really post World War II.
Right.
The story I heard is it's born out of. I've heard a couple different takes, but roughly the timeline is post World War II. The Germans were uh, so despondent that they had a hard time staying in sauna, and the origins of the role goes to somebody who would go in, apply loyally,
Mhm.
and would just engage with the guests.
Okay.
And at some point they introduced, the air circulation, and at some point they began using tools to deliver heat. Now, exactly when therapy was introduced, and how I'm still trying to chase down, but the current sort of old guard for the competitive off-goose scene really started forming in like 2 to 2.5 decades ago. And
Okay.
my understanding is that's when they started introducing essential oils.
Okay.
Back then, they're using like synthetic essential oils.
Okay.
Yeah. So, um, you know, quickly realized this isn't very healthy. Brigila is a Italian oil company. They were, one of the first ones that were, used to introduce pure essential oils into the sauna.
Okay.
Airmen came onto the scene later, but it's a relatively young practice. And, again, Aufguss is a German word for infusion. And so it is exactly that. You're sort of combining all of these different elements. And so you have loyally, and Aufguss uses loyally. And, you do have whisks, and Aufguss in some forms does use whisks.
Okay.
Yeah. And it really, and you have different aromatherapy, vehicles and practices, but Aufguss combines them all and makes them very applied and makes this really beautiful full experience from it.
Well, infusion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's kind of the development of it and how it relates to pre-existing traditions.
Great. Yeah, because I think, when I first got into Aufguss, and I was introduced to Aufguss in Switzerland, and I lived on the German side of Switzerland, right? So very much influenced by German culture as well. And yeah, I was like, what is this? And I tried to do some research to understand the history of it, but there isn't actually a lot out there, right? So
No.
that's why it's really such a pleasure to talk with you today because it for those who just wanna learn more, you Google it and you have more questions than answers sometimes about Alcus, so
Yeah.
yeah.
And I will say, like, Mikkel Alland, who wrote Sweat, which is, one of the classic books about just bathing in or sweat, but like, relatively bathed
Yeah.
nature. He recently dropped I think a documentary, a docu-series on Amazon Prime called The Perfect Sweat, which
Okay.
covers a number of different practices. And their first episode, which I saw, is on Aufguss, where they go to Italy and they're speaking with some of the, OGs from Italy, and like they visit Bergila's facility. They speak with some of the sauna masters I met in Europe. So
Okay.
there's starting to be a little more documentation, but, it's so funny. When I went to the World Masters in September, it was
Mhm.
my first time going to Europe, really threw me into the whole Aufguss world. I didn't know
Yeah.
how much of an accelerant it would be.
Yeah.
But one of the things that was fun is I have a dance background. I was in the realm of hip hop for
Okay.
a decade.
Yeah.
And I always like people who are in that world, sometimes look at me funny when I say the realm of hip hop. And they're like, what
Yeah.
do you mean? I'm like,
Okay.
you know what I mean? Because hip hop has a very, you know, protective history,
Mhm.
which every right to, it's 50 years old, over 50 years old. There's many things that are conflated through hip hop as it's become more commercial. And so you have some people who are very like, like this is hip hop and this
Yeah.
isn't hip hop, or
Yeah.
and you'll have multiple different parties with different, very strongly held positions
Yeah.
on that. And so hip hop is very protective of its culture and protective of its lineage. And that's what I grew up in, and I was part of those conversations, and I was part of like witnessing the commercialization of dance through social media over the 2010s. And coming from that, I got into Aufguss, and Aufguss is so young
Yes.
and it's very inaccessible. There's only a handful of places in the US to do it. You can't find much online about it. There's not much footage because it's in the sauna.
Mhm.
And so I went to Europe. I went to the Aufguss World Masters, the biggest
Yeah.
competition and championship held. And I met sauna masters from all over the world, and, all of the jury members, the OGs who were there from the beginning. And asked them, I was like, I really want to understand the culture and the history so I can go home and
Yep.
represent it properly,
Yeah.
right? Because that's what a lot of I was learning in hip hop is like you got to respect
Yes. Respect the
the
origins and
history,
the yeah.
yeah,
That's
the
great.
customs and everything. And the response I got was like, oh, it's like it's so young, it's so new, and like
Yeah.
every country's different and there's no wrong way to do it. And, like, it's, you'll figure it out. And like, just,
Wow.
yeah. And I was like, really? I was like, this is a
Yeah.
completely different.
I would have expected what you expected.
Yeah,
Considering, like, the other practices, sauna practices that you described, they come from I mean, some of them are thousands of years old, right? And so you're like, "Okay, I wanna be respectful and represent it,"
yeah.
and so yeah, but that did that give you a newfound permission to, like
Well, I just, yes and no. Because I still am very, I think it's appropriate. And, I think it's good because, like hip hop, in my opinion, has some of those issues where just like in the process of trying to hold really strict boundaries, not only can you end up like sort of stifling organic development, but you also can't have the right conversations around it. You know,
Yes,
like
okay.
as a brief aside, one of my good friends who, you know, was dancing on teams like I was, and then got into freestyle and then got into like hip hop foundation. I prefer his definition where there's 3 stages of hip hop dance. You have breakdancing at its origin, then you have sort of like bounced derived hip hop, which was, more from like I'd say around the 90s, and then modern hip hop is like light feet, which is developed in the
Okay.
past decade or so. And it's like culturally specific, regionally
Mm.
specific, like has, various like key figures and, you can kind of trace it. And because of that definition, I find that you're then able to talk about like, well, this is how one can define what hip hop is, and you can see that through these different eras, and you can see how these take different forms within it,
Mhm.
and then you can from there describe what isn't hip hop and why it isn't hip hop, and you can then just talk about how it became to be associated with it.
Yeah.
And so I'm very big. I mean, again, like I was doing art and romantic and spiritual philosophy, and like it was much of that where I was, like love. I'm like love and in love are two very different things, and like that you use the word love for each of them kind of muddies the water. So come to Aufguss, and I'm like, yes, it's great that it's flexible, but you know, everybody's calling all these Aufgusses modern classic, and like the range of experience you can have in them is so wide. Then like, what does it actually mean? So
Yeah.
it's fun because on the one hand, you have a lot of freedom to play, and that's really important. Um, and it's also good because it's so loose, it I think gives license to start making those claims and start saying this is what I think Aufguss is, and this is what I think it, the core of it is, and these are the different, forms that it's assuming, and what is or isn't Aufguss,
Mhm.
you have to be able to describe it. And, I think that conversation is gonna, especially now that it's, it's in Japan, it's
Mhm.
coming to or it's in North America, it's going to other countries as it grows more and as it starts to bleed um, into and from other practices. Really, there's going to be a point where it's like, okay, what is
Yeah,
Aufguss?
have some true definition around it.
And I think this is just the point for it.
Right.
Aufguss is so young that they're like, it's young and it's flexible is just where it's been.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's such a good point, and, like, I think, we talked about this before the interview, but, like, you're obviously I would call you, like, a thought leader on
Oh, thank
outfits for sure, right? And so you're coming in thinking about how can we categorize Aufguss in a way to, yeah, like, educate and have I think there is a lot of benefit to having that structure, and
Yeah,
especially as it proliferates, and I hope it does proliferate because there's so many benefits to it, but
and it will.
join Alonzo and me in the second part of our conversation as we dive deeper into Aufguss topics. Things like tips for experiencing Aufguss for the first time, creating an Aufguss culture in America, and how and where you can experience Alonzo in action. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I love hearing from you all, so please take a moment to comment with any suggestions or thoughts. This is still a one-person operation at the moment, just me. I've quit my corporate job and I'm following this crazy passion I have for bathing. So your engagement and your support really means a lot. Follow us on Instagram at badii.life, that's BADII.LIFE, and visit our website at badii.life if you want to subscribe to our Body Talk newsletter. Tschüss!